in your journey, but...
Hey guys, we're back. I didn't mean to look that up. Damn it. Jesus. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 beta release date. What? The first round of beta open closes at 10 a.m. on September 4th. A second of beta of 31, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we're gonna play it and run until September 9th. So if you miss the first one, you'll still have one more shot to try it out before launch day. Jesus. Oh. Okay, so we're gonna play. When? What? Oh, okay. When is the first beta for Black Ops 6? August 30th, 31st. Oh. Fuck yeah. Oh, we are going to game like a motherfucker. You're doing me dirty. You're doing me dirty. You're doing me dirty.
The mainframe with a virus in order for them.
Fuck you, I didn't want that. But
suddenly get wrapped up in two guys controlling the town who want each other dead. You could easily spend an hour or so in this side quest alone, and the game is so effortless in throwing you off the beaten path for a fun and engaging story that you'll forget how you even got there to begin with. This is also an example of Fallout's moral ambiguity. There's not a fully correct and satisfying answer to this quest. You can do the perceived correct thing in helping Killian and killing Gizmo, but the town's business suffers for it. There's lots of examples like this. Yeah, there's some side quests like this one that's basically just, hey, my house has bad guys, you kill the bad guys and the day is saved. But most of the bigger side quests that are specific to certain locations have this layer of ambiguity that makes picking a side incredibly interesting. This is something that carries into the best games of the series, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Fallout's world, though actually pretty small, feels huge and alive. There's only a few locations, but random encounters on the map, the numerous NPCs you meet on your quest, and the fact that the player character feels like such a small part of the story early on add to the game's perceived size. As someone who played the later games first, like I imagine 99% of the people watching this have, it's really impressive to go back and see just how much of what makes those later games great is already established in this first title. Fallout has a reputation for being archaic or dated, but I prefer to call it advanced or charming. Yeah, I mean, graphically it doesn't look amazing or anything, but in terms of art style and atmosphere, the game holds up incredibly well. And the lesser level of detail never detracted from my experience. Except whenever I can't tell who's on screen because a lot of the NPCs look exactly the same. But Fallout lives up to the hype. It's an RPG that feels truly free. Like all of the best games in the series, it does a fantastic job setting up the main story to appear relatively simple at first, before unraveling into a life or death situation. Not just for you, but for the wasteland as a whole. Sound familiar? In 1, it's the water chip, then the super mutants and the master. In 2, it's the village of Arroyo and the Gek, then it's the Enclave. In New Vegas, it's the courier getting shot, the platinum chip, then Hoover Dam. Keep going on and on, but it's impressive how much of a blueprint Fallout 1 really is. Concise seems to be the perfect descriptor for this game. It's not very long, and sometimes it feels a bit lacking in content compared to its sequels, but bigger doesn't always equate to better, and Fallout 1's quest design and atmosphere is up there with the best in the series. In fact, this might be my single favorite game in the series atmospherically. The art style is just so dark and decrepit. It makes sense that this game takes place closest to when the bombs dropped out of any game in the series. It's pretty bleak. Yeah, people have started to build societies from rubble, and it's not entirely hopeless, but it has an overwhelming feeling of dread to it, without being so overly comical like many of the series' later entries. Don't get me wrong, the game definitely has a sense of humor, but it doesn't feel so beaten into the ground yet. One of the biggest things contributing to the bleak atmosphere of the game is the excellent score by Mark Morgan. It's borderline soul-suckingly eerie, and it fits perfectly with the game's art style. I mentioned briefly wanting to see a 3D Fallout game that looks like these first two games in the series, and though I think the Fallout series actually made a pretty graceful transition to 3D, I'd still love to see one in this style. That brooding red sky, the late 90s PC graphics, the uncanny talking heads. It all adds to the game's charm and makes it just feel so unique. You really feel like part of the world, both because the game is so immersive in its design, but also in its RPG mechanics. Fallout 1 also has an incredibly memorable and intriguing final boss. Obviously, the Master's character design is fantastic and something that's hard to forget, but what's also great about him is his reasoning as a villain. It's easy to see why he does the things he does, and it's hard to fault a man striving for unity in the dark and unforgiving wastes, even if doing so unethically. He also listens to reason. If you find out that the mutants are sterile somewhere along your adventure, you can bring this up to him and he will destroy the cathedral and give up on his dreams upon hearing the news. Overall, it's a great conclusion and one that represents Fallout's strengths. And just like every encounter, you get to decide what to do here. You can talk him out of his plans, you can engage in combat directly, you can even find a nuke under the cathedral and take the whole place out without even talking to or meeting the Master at all. I like the Bethesda Fallout games, but this is before the series resorted to unkillable NPCs, enemy scaling, and a straight-line waypoint marker main quest. There's a lot to love about Fallout 1, but unfortunately it's not perfect. Most people seem to blame Bethesda for the bugginess of Fallout games, but even the early Interplay titles shipped pretty buggy. There are patches, and they're included with the GOG and Steam releases, so I highly recommend going for those if you can. I believe the versions available on Xbox Game Pass for PC are patched too, but I'm not certain. Definitely don't play without it. Unfortunately, even with the patches included, you can still run into some problems and jank. It's a 27-year-old game, and it can feel like it at times. There's also just some things that aren't perfect for the role-playing. Like, for example, at the Boneyard, I went straight for the Deathclaws without talking to any NPCs, and killed all of them for the Gunrunners. And when I came back to do some side quests, my character still acted as if I'd never even seen them. Same deal when I went to talk to the Brotherhood. The Elder mentions not even believing the Deathclaws truly exist, and there's no dialogue option for saying that they actually do and you fought them. This stuff is pretty minor, but it's something that later Fallout games do a lot better. That makes you feel like you've got a lot more impact on the world. Like in New Vegas, when you clear the Deathclaws in Quarry Junction. You can go to Sloan and tell Chomps Lewis that they're all dead, even if you haven't met them before. But in terms of a concise and tight RPG that does what it sets out to do well, you'd have a hard time doing better than the original Fallout. Especially when considering the small but dedicated team that made the project. The work that was done here is wildly impressive. The game gives you that incredibly open-ended game design to tackle problems however you see fit. And that's exactly what Fallout is about. It introduced the special system, skill point system, traits, and perks all in this first game, and it's still one of the best ways to design a character in an RPG. And it's something I'm really disappointed that they ended up changing. But we'll get there when we get there. For now, let's take a quick look at Fallout's much bigger and more ambitious sequel, Fallout 2. So Fallout 1 was developed largely by Tim Cain, who honestly probably deserves credit for the entire series, considering it kind of started as his passion project. Fallout 1 was a pretty big deal in terms of super nerdy PC RPGs, and it was just done pretty well. So so a sequel was definitely in the cards. Tim Kaine and his team started work on Fallout 2 before 1 even released, and continued developing for a while, until he quit Interplay due to conflicting ideals about the direction of the Fallout series and mismanagement. This is a gross oversimplification, so I recommend checking out his YouTube channel. He has a lot of videos where he talks about developing Fallout, working at Interplay, and RPG game design, and it's really interesting and insightful for fans of the series. But long story short, after losing his bonus and not being able to see eye to eye with Brian Fargo, CEO of Interplay, Tim Kaine, as well as 2 other people who worked on OG Fallout, left Interplay to start their own company, Troika Games. Troika would go on to make some great games, including one of my favorites, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. And Interplay would continue work on Fallout 2, although technically the game was developed by an in-house group at Interplay called Black Isle Studios. Fallout 2 was bigger and in some ways better than its predecessor. There's probably double the locations, characters, side quests, and just content in general compared to Fallout 1. Fallout 1 gives you a water chip to go after, and then suddenly you find yourself in a much higher stakes situation. In this game, the Gek is the MacGuffin, and the Enclave is the much bigger late-game threat. I wish I could say the beginning of this game was handled with grace, but unfortunately compared to any other non-Bethesda Fallout game, this game has by far the worst opening. It's interesting hearing Tim Kaine talk about why this happened. I once again highly recommend his channel. Apparently the tutorial intro was mandated by the marketing team, despite objections from most of the devs and designers. Anyway, yeah, the Temple of Trials is unskippable and quite tedious. It's not so bad your first time through, and you can at least talk your way out of fighting at the end of it, which helps teach the player that there will be many ways to approach each obstacle in the game. Compare this to the Vaults and Bethesda games, where you pretty much have to do exactly what the game wants you to do. To cut Bethesda some slack, a lot of people seem to think that they were the first ones to rehash premises from previous games, or to implement boring intros. But no, that started in the Interplay era with Fallout 2. To give Fallout 2 credit, acquiring the Gek isn't nearly the same as getting a water chip, but go get this MacGuffin seems to be a good enough reason to get you out into wastes. And once you're given total freedom, Fallout 2 is mostly fantastic. It's pretty similar to the first in terms of quest design, which is a good thing. There's just a lot more here. Unlike Fallout 1, there's no time limit for the first bit of the main quest. The game kind of pretends that there is with these telepathic visions you get of the village dying throughout the game, which definitely adds some urgency. However, no matter how fast or slow you go with getting the Gek, the village suffers the same fate. Technically, the game will just suddenly end after 13 in-game years, but the chances of you actually hitting that are incredibly slim. Because of this and the bigger map, it's easier to get lost in Fallout 2 and spend more time with it. The Enclave is a series staple and a hugely intimidating big bad for the game as well. I think the super mutants and the Master from the first game are written a little bit better though. You can actually understand the Master's ethos, and it doesn't just feel evil for the sake of it. It's hard to say the same about the Enclave. There's not a lot of justification for them doing the things they do. I'm not saying they lack depth entirely, but the Enclave definitely doesn't stack up to the excellent writing of the Master in Fallout 1. The That is some of the best writing and character design in the series. What the Enclave does represent to me, though, is an excellent towering foe that makes me want to become high level and take out Frank Horrigan every time. That's something really satisfying about Fallout 2 and just the series in general. The RPG mechanics are fine-tuned to make you feel like such a beast in the endgame, and it's really rewarding, especially when you've spent 15 to 20 hours to get there. I'll talk more about the final boss here in a bit, but one thing I want to touch on is the difference in atmosphere between this game and its predecessor. Fallout 2 feels a bit more lively in atmosphere than Fallout 1, but definitely not in tone. There's themes of I think it's a bit much. Not because I don't think the series can handle these topics with grace and respect, but because I don't think it's handled that way here. The game is kind of covered in this childish sense of humor and view of sex that's sometimes admittedly funny, but really predecessor. Fallout 2 feels a bit more lively in atmosphere than Fallout 1, but definitely not in tone. There's themes of I think it's a bit much. Not in tone. There's themes of I think it's a bit much. Not because I don't think the series can handle these topics with grace and respect, but because I don't think it's handled that way here. The game game is kind of covered in this childish sense of humor and view of sex that sometimes admittedly but really takes you out of the experience other times. Don't get me wrong, the series has always had a great sense of humor, and there's a few lines here that really crack me up, but the game is just taking the ha-ha sexual joke thing really far in a way that hurts the experience overall, I think. Like when you get in an arm wrestling competition with a super mutant and your punishment is to be the mutant's gimp for the night, it's just silly and adds nothing to the game. That being said, when the writing is good, it's really good. There's a lot of great talking heads here, but I don't think there's as many charismatic ones as the first. There's definitely memorable assholes. Those are everywhere. And overall, the character writing's pretty good. There's a lot of quirky moments here where I can tell the developers were having fun with us, and I think that's cool. Like when you get to Vault 8 in Vault City and find out that the water chips from the first game were accidentally sent here instead of Vault 8. And of course, the fact that the get is found in Vault 13 makes a nice callback to the first game. You can go on and on about the differences between the two games, but truthfully, it had been a few years since I played either, and some things between them kind of blended in my mind. That's because Fallout 2 is a true sequel. It's not really trying anything that different. It's not reinventing the wheel or anything. It's just the same Fallout formula from the first game, with a lot more content and new story. When you look at it that way, Fallout 3 is a wonderful success. This is Fallout, more of it. It's slightly more action-focused. There's a lot more weaponry to choose from. There's a lot more NPCs to meet and towns to go to. On paper, it's better in just about every way than Fallout 1, but unfortunately, it falls a little flat compared to the first for me. I think Fallout 2 is the overall bigger and better experience. The side quests are really good and fleshed out for the most part, and you can lose yourself for hours in Fallout 2's Wasteland. But I do think that Fallout 1 is an overall more enjoyable time. It's quality over quantity for me. Small criticism here, but I will say, the first two Fallouts are a lot more linear than people give them credit for. Yeah, you're free to do most things as you please, but did you know if you aggro Arroyo at the beginning of the game, then leave, the game will just end? You literally have to save your village in Fallout 2, and you have to get the water chip in Fallout 1, or you will also get a game over. To be fair, I think there's only one game in the series that isn't like this, and I'm sure you know which one it is. Yeah, there should ultimately be an end goal so that the game can end eventually, but I do think it's slightly frustrating to be railroaded in certain parts of what's ultimately an incredibly free and open experience. Nitpicks aside, Fallout 2 is great and offers a decent final boss. A gigantic super mutant in custom huge power armor. Yeah, it's really nothing crazy, but he is incredibly imposing. Perhaps not as much of a horrifying Cronenberg monstrosity as the Master in the first game, and definitely less interesting than him too, but it suffices. One thing that does bother me a good bit is the fact that you can't talk him down. Many other Fallout games usually have speech checks to talk down the final bosses in the games, kind of cementing speech as a cornerstone of the series and rightfully making it just as useful as combat. But there's no option to do that here. I kind of get it. This is literally a 10-foot tall super mutant crazy soldier guy. He's ready for a fight. But still, it's a bit disappointing that it's not here. I do love how he keeps calling you a mutie, despite being over 10 feet tall and a literal super mutant. Shortly before the fight, we do get to hear the Enclave's master plan, and it's incredibly evil as you would suspect. The goal is to use FEV as a bioweapon to basically wipe out humanity except for the Enclave. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Kinda just seems like they're evil just to be evil. Don't get me wrong, it definitely works, and the Enclave as a whole are a really intimidating faction. It just doesn't really seem in line with the series' usually in-depth and lore-heavy writing style. One thing that's pretty neat about Fallout 2 is the ability to keep playing once you've beaten the game. This pretty much means that you can get the main quest out of the way and then do all of the side quests at your own leisure as a heavy power-armored beast. This is really fun and something the series should have learned from and did in every subsequent entry. Overall, I ragged on it pretty hard, but Fallout 2 is an amazing game and one I was happy to come back to for this video. It's definitely got some flaws, and I'm not just talking about the same stuff you hear relentlessly online about how unplayable and cryptic the old games are. I'm talking about the humor, the choices, the main storyline even. It's a fantastic game, but it just doesn't fully meet the mark in the way that other games in the series do for me. I'm honestly shocked to have come to this conclusion because I remember loving this game when I first played it and feeling that it could be my favorite in the series. But spending time with it again has made me realize that it's definitely not. That being said, in terms of a fantastic Fallout experience, you could do a whole lot worse than Fallout 2.
My kill Google so goddamn fast and hard. My hackers will deal with anybody who tries to stop that shit. Because they are above the law. And they work in high class areas.
Really meet the mark in the way that other games in the series do for me. I'm honestly shocked to have come to this conclusion because I remember loving this game when I first played it and feeling that it could be my favorite in the series. But spending time with it again has made me realize that it's definitely not. That being said, in terms of a fantastic Fallout experience, you could do a whole lot worse than Fallout 2. So what was next for the Fallout series? There were a couple spin-offs. I've heard middling things about them, but admittedly never played them. And honestly, I've got a lot of games to play, so I'm not going to look at them for this video. But they exist, and they were pretty much the only thing Fallout related to come out for almost 10 years. So what happened? Well, Interplay was not making a lot of money. There were at least 2 attempts to get Fallout 3 off the ground, with one of them even having a leaked tech demo. Fallout 3 Van Buren, as it's called by fans, probably would have been a huge game, and honestly, seems like it would have been fantastic. Many subtle story beats from New Vegas were taken from the cancelled Van Buren, most notably characters like Joshua Graham and factions like Caesar's Legion. It's an interesting what if, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Interplay ran out of money and sold the Fallout IP to Bethesda in 2004. A lot of people wanted it too, apparently even Troika Games, that company I mentioned earlier, founded by OG Fallout devs, was interested in buying the IP. But Bethesda had Morrowind money now and made a smart financial move in the acquisition of the series. They also made sure that Fallout 3 would happen, and happen it did. Finally released in 2008, we got a proper new entry in the Fallout series. This game would prove to be incredibly different from the series' previous entries, maintaining some RPG mechanics, but completely switching genres from a turn-based RPG to a first-person shooter RPG hybrid. This move undoubtedly brought a lot of new fans to the series, myself included. It's a lot easier for a modern gamer to wrap their heads around this than this. However, as I touched on before, if you just click to the Fallout 3 section of the video and haven't played the older games, I highly recommend you do so. They're not that archaic or unforgiving, and you're genuinely missing out on a great experience. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of the way, Fallout 3 is a decent game. Much like 2, I have quite a few grievances with it, except probably even more so for this one. But let's touch on some positives. Mechanically, they did about as good a job as they possibly could, given the engine they used. Honestly, it's great. I think besides the plentiful bugs, which aren't really a problem with mods on PC, the way they handled character creation, inventory, graphics, and presentation overall is fantastic for the era that it came out in. There's a lot of things introduced here, or at least expanded on greatly. VATS was introduced in this game, and it's probably one of the most iconic gameplay mechanics in modern FPS history. It's a continuation of the aimed shots in the first 2 titles, but with Fallout 3 being a first-person shooter, it works especially well for this game. The Pip-Boy is also expanded upon a lot. It's a perfect inventory system for the series, and was absolutely nailed down in this game. They also added a radio to the Pip-Boy, and regardless of what you may think about listening to jaunty, old-timey tunes while in combat or engaging in dialogue, it's a cool feature and one I'm glad to have. The first 2 games introduced the use of licensed old music in their cinematics. However, it was Fallout 3 that really brought it to the forefront of Fallout's retro-futuristic aesthetic. I also appreciate how they haven't gone too far into the whole 50s America aesthetic. It's always been a part of the series and was handled really well in the first 4 mainline titles, before Fallout 4 went way too far in that direction for my liking. This is also a pretty huge game with a lot to do. It still feels like a Fallout game in that regard. It has a bleak atmosphere, more reminiscent of the first game. This game's sense of humor didn't really get under my skin the same way that 2's did. The atmosphere in general is something that a lot of people love about Fallout 3, myself included. In fact, a lot of this architecture looks like something right out of the first game. It feels faithful to the series. I argue that when it comes to presentation overall, Fallout 3 is damn good. One of the better games in the series. That being said, there's a pretty ugly green filter over the entire game, and even though you could argue it adds to the game's art direction, I usually turn it off with a mod called Fallout. This is the only time I'm going to be using a mod that changes any of these games visually, but it's not like Fallout 3 looks bad without it. It's just something I use pretty much every playthrough, and I didn't want to uninstall it or not use it just for the sake of criticism. That being said, about halfway through I did actually turn it off. Fallout 3 looks good with or without Fallout, and the transition to 3D was handled with grace here, making Fallout 3 one of the best Fallout games ever in regards to atmosphere. Unfortunately, the presentation is about the only aspect of the game that I can truly say that about. There's an admittedly pretty cool opening cinematic to start things off. It's very reminiscent of the cinematic from the first game, which isn't surprising. They used previous games for inspiration a lot when it came to designing Fallout 3, which is a good thing. However, when it comes to the main story and the factions within the main story, it begins to feel a little like rehashing. You start the game in a vault, similar to the first, except this time you don't start right outside the vault doors. There's a pretty annoying intro to this game going through your first 19 years at the vault. And it's not insanely overly long or anything, but it is quite boring. It's been so long since I played this game for the first time that I don't quite remember, but I imagine it was pretty effective on me the first time. It eases you into it, and I think that's fine. There are a lot of RPGs that are some of my favorites of all time that have long intros or take a while to get fully started. The problem is that they already made this mistake in Fallout 2, and Bethesda didn't learn from Black Isle's blunder here. Another problem with the opening sequence here is that there are only a few genuine role-playing moments. In fact, I can only really think of one. Your high school bully, Butch, initiates dialogue about his mother being attacked by rab roaches. You can either go in there and save his mom yourself, kill Butch, or you can even convince him to overcome his fear of the roaches, give him your BB gun, and watch him do it himself. This is genuinely cool, and an example of good quest design in a Fallout game. Yeah, it's pretty simple, and it's not a huge thing, but the game provides you with several options to approach the situation, as Fallout always should do. Unfortunately, many of the quests throughout the game aren't even close to following this same approach. Fallout 3 does not give you a lot of choice. Like, for example, later in the vault, you can choose to kill the Overseer for his password, or just find his password in a locker. Yeah, the game is teaching you that you don't always have to kill people to progress forward, but it basically turns the whole thing into kill or not kill. The game is littered with this very black and white mentality, with not many examples of a true morally great decision, something the series was known for in every preceding entry. The classic example of this is Megaton. It's infamous because it's a baffling game design decision, and one that kind of encapsulates Fallout 3's problems with player freedom. Megaton is also the first real place you go to after exiting the vault, and it's a cool idea for a town in a Fallout game. It's built around an atomic bomb, with some of the inhabitants even worshipping the bomb itself. They call themselves the Children of the Atom, and it's fun to talk to Confessor Cromwell and learn more about the group. But there's no quest here with them at all. You can either blow up the town or disarm the bomb. It's a shame because a town built around an atomic bomb is a really cool idea, and I can imagine that given more time or just a better team of writers, there could be some really cool quests here. The fact that there's not a single side quest with the Children of Atom is a bummer. It's kind of surprising, right? I feel like usually when RPGs like this introduce a religious cult-like faction, that's a perfect opportunity to have some great side quests, but there aren't any here. Technically, Confessor Professor Cromwell is involved with the big quest of Megaton, urging the player not to disarm the bomb. But something a bit more involved would be nice. I'm not sure if this was due to time constraints or what, but it's definitely kind of disappointing. Before I keep ragging on this game, I do feel the need to specify that I actually quite like it. It's Fallout 3, you know? I played this game to death, and most of my time spent was really enjoyable. That's because Fallout 3's world is really good. The best thing to do in this game is to walk around the open map and discover new locations. There's some really good ones here. One of my favorites is the Republic of Dave. It's a small town with only 5 or so people in the northwest corner of the map. He claims to be an elected leader, but he's the only one who's ever ran in the elections. If you convince some of the other inhabitants to run in the election and tamper with the ballot box, you can elect someone else to be president. The funniest thing about this is that the town name never changes, and the people don't even realize that they can run. They just assume Dave is their leader. You have to pass a speech check to convince the others that it's okay for them to run in the election. If someone else is elected, Dave will completely ignore the fact that there's not 5 votes in the ballot box, give up on the town entirely, and run to the most dangerous area of the game, Old Oni. He usually dies, but if you follow him and kill all of the death claws that Old Oni is infested with, he can survive. In which case, he will just sit down in this little corner and claim Old Oni as the new Republic of Dave. Honestly, I love this stupid little quest, and I think it's hilarious. Dave running off to the most dangerous area in the game for no reason to start a new republic, which is basically entirely in his head, considering there are no other people in Old Oni, is a great moment. Dave and all the people in the town feel like they're from another planet, and it's just a cool little quest. And the multiple outcomes here feel very in line with the series. There's a few things like this in the game. There's Vault 108, which is inhabited by nothing but clones named Gary, and the only dialogue they have is the word Gary, which they yell as they attack you. This is really funny and all, but I will say it feels kind of pointless. Like, there's absolutely no room for role-playing here. There's just these crazy quirky guys in this vault, and your only option is to kill them. Yeah, there's some nice vault tech lore here, but it's not enough to satiate that hunger for more fun side quests. As I mentioned, there are a lot of cool side quests and moments in this game. Unfortunately, I don't think the game is all that good at pointing you in their direction. You pretty much just have to seek them out or run into them as you go, which is fine because the world is genuinely pretty fun to explore, but it's a downgrade from other entries in the series. Take Fallout 1, for example. Yeah, there's only like 10 locations, but you're bound to experience all of it, and it's all incredibly quality. You're very likely to visit Shady Sands on your way to Vault 15, because the game is designed around smoothly integrating its side content. I'm willing to bet a lot of casual players of Fallout 3, especially near the time of release, didn't even get to experience any of this cool stuff because they were busy with the honestly pretty poorly written main quest. It's like the previous games in that you have one seemingly simple goal that turns into something a lot bigger, but it's definitely too much like the previous games. In 2, it was a lot more forgivable because there was a new brooding faction that really kind of inspired fear in the player. There were random encounters on the map with the final boss showing his brutality in-game. The game made a point to hype up the Enclave, and it worked in providing a genuinely chilling villain in the game. I might have some qualms with the Enclave's motivations being kind of silly and pointless in Fallout 2, but they were overall a really intimidating and well-designed antagonist for the game. Fallout 3's main villain is the Enclave. Okay. Didn't we destroy them on the other side of the country years ago? Bethesda has this really annoying habit of utilizing previous factions and lore in their games, but doing so in a slightly head-scratching way. You can tell that had Interplay or Troika Games made Fallout 3, we would be facing something different and probably a lot more interesting. So, whatever, Bethesda reused the Enclave. I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it if they didn't just suddenly kind of appear in the main quest with no real build-up or payoff. It feels like they started writing the main story and just realized at some point that they needed a big bad for the game, and chose the previous game's antagonist in an attempt to win over fans of the older titles. The problem is, a new, more interesting East Coast exclusive faction would have been a significantly better move and made for a more interesting overall experience. They did the same thing with the Brotherhood of Steel and Super Mutants. All things that really shouldn't be here, but are. Now, I do think that a few people get some things wrong about Fallout 3's Brotherhood. I don't blame them for being upset about how they were handled, I get it. In terms of the main quest, they are the generic good guys that swoop in to save the day. It's a far cry from the reclusive Brotherhood of the first two games. The same Brotherhood that sends you on a death mission, not expecting you to come back in Fallout 1. But I will say in Fallout 3's defense, you can find some supplemental lore here that suggests that the Brotherhood is not wholly good and can actually be pretty uninclusive and fucked up. You learn in the underworld that the Brotherhood shoots ghouls on sight, seeing them as basically the same as mutants. Speaking of mutants, the Brotherhood also sees them as a scourge on society, and basically has a shoot-on-sight policy for them as well. Which brings me to the super mutants in general. I also think the point I hear pretty often about Fallout 3 not respecting mutants, seeing them as targets or something to shoot at, while mostly true, is also true of Fallout 1. I don't really think it's something Bethesda did first. Yeah, in the first game you can talk to a couple mutants, but it almost always leads to violence. But it does make a lot more sense in 1 than in 3 because the main quest is centered around the Master's plan. It's literally a war of mutants versus humans in 1, so it's a lot more justifiable. In 3, many years have passed, yet most people still have a very hostile view of the mutants. Compare this to 2, where the town of Broken Hills is a community of mutants, ghouls, and humans living peacefully. It just seems like lazy writing on Bethesda's part. They tried to explain why mutants are even here with Vault 87, which is honestly a pretty cool vault in the game. Apparently there's another form of FEV creating mutants in the East Coast. It's not very convincing, and this was the beginning of Bethesda's constant new FEV iterations to explain their own bad lore. But in terms of atmosphere and audio design, these weird failed FEV experiments, it's actually really well done. It's just a shame that one of the coolest vaults in the game is unfortunately the product of unnecessary retcons and lazy writing. To give Bethesda some credit, there's a very iconic mutant character in this game. Fox is an intelligent and brutal super mutant who you can actually recruit as a companion, similar to Marcus in 2. There's definitely some expansion on the mutants here compared to 1, but I do feel like it's a step back compared to 2. Why is there no society, no goal, or anything with the super mutants? Even in the first game, despite a majority of the mutants you meet not being very intelligent and them ultimately being the main antagonists, they rallied behind a realistic and feasible goal which meet the mark in the way that other games in the series do for me. I'm honestly shocked to have come to this conclusion because I remember loving this game when I first played it and feeling that it could be my favorite in the series. But spending time with it again has made me realize that it's definitely not. That being said, in terms of a fantastic Fallout experience, you could do a whole lot worse than Fallout 2. So what was next for the Fallout series? There were a couple spin-offs. I've heard middling things about them, but admittedly never played them. And honestly, I've got a lot of games to play, so I'm not...
I let him find out where that one video is. Where the guy is, hiding from the people.
So's your coffee.
Everyone was so happy. Nothing could possibly threaten such an idyllic way of life. Well, except for the constant threat of a Soviet
53 negative 500.
The Soviets were not fans of the American capitalistic way of life. They hated our cookie-cutter houses that all looked the same. They preferred brutalist apartment buildings that all looked the same. Understandably, Americans were pretty freaked out about an upcoming atomic annihilation. To many, it wasn't a matter of if, but when. The government was also pretty freaked out, so they put together the Civil Defense Administration. It was the Civil Defense Administration's job to keep Americans safe in the event of a Soviet nuclear strike. They were responsible for the implementation of civil defense sirens, what we call tornado sirens today. They were also responsible for CONELRAD, a precursor to the emergency alert system we have now. The CDA was also curious about the effects of nuclear weaponry on buildings such as homes and warehouses. They wanted to know what would happen to the people inside of these buildings, and where the best places within those buildings would be to take shelter. So throughout the 1950s, they tested numerous atomic bombs on various civilian structures. Warehouses, bunkers, homes, bank vaults, cars. They even built a tiny town with working electricity and various home designs. In several of these tests, they used mannequins to showcase atomic bombs' effects on humans. Time and time again, they constructed buildings only to just nuke them to see what happens. So what did happen? What did they learn from these experiments? What happened to the mannequins? Can we still use this data today? Like, what really are the best places to take shelter? I want to know in case, something happens in upcoming years. Also, are there any remnants of these structures today? Did you go and visit them? That is what we're talking about. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into the video and watch tons of nuclear bomb footage, let's watch this simulated nuclear bomb footage from today's video sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is a massive online free-to-play
Get the
action
fuck
military
out of here, you
combat game where
faggot.
you battle via land, sea, and air. Oh, on the high seas, that is also an option.
I'm gonna
All
fucking
with
kill
this
you, nigger. Kill this fucking idiot.
updates. The recent Seek and Destroy update for
I'm gonna kill you.
added new maps and new homing missiles. Download War Thunder today.
Shut up, you fucking nigger.
Tank for a week. A special decorator, Eco.
You're a cunt. Negative 492. Negative 492. Oh, okay, so, I wonder if that's on public domain. Is Glenn Miller in the mood? Public domain. No, it is not. What? Fuck you. Hold on. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Fuck you. Figure 602. 397. Okay. Virginia down to Tennessee. My love took me down to the river to silence me. Oh, I was wondering why that seemed off. Oh, okay, over here. I could go here, but I gotta travel. No. I used to never beat. Those are like gold mines. No. 481. 538. Four 538. We need to head south. I'm gonna fucking kill you cunts. Oh my god. There's bathroom. No, you fucking niggers. I'm gonna slit your fucking throats, Google.
Here we are driving down the road, and all of a sudden,
Faggots.
bang! Oh, there was a crash.
See? I'm gonna fucking cut their heads off. I'm gonna cut their fucking heads off, you don't goddamn know. I wanna find that one guy who was running. Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna look up that thing I looked at before. You goddamn niggers. See, I didn't click on that. I'm gonna fucking kill you faggots. Gonna kill you. You don't know. And slit their throats so goddamn hard. I'm gonna poison those bastards too. Fucking niggers, get out of here with this shit. Man running from people in the woods. Running from people in the woods. Running from people in the woods. You fucking niggers. Goddamn you niggers. God damn you.
Daniel O'Neill is a YouTuber from the UK with a channel called English Woodsman, where he's been uploading videos of his wild camping, stealth camping. And woodland camping trips in the UK for almost 10 years. Most of the channel's videos feature Daniel reviewing camping gear for his viewers and showing footage of his adventures in the great outdoors. For the most part, they're pretty tame, but in August 2023, he uploaded a video of his camping trip in the woodlands close to his home, and the footage is pretty disturbing. The first part of the video pretty much just shows Daniel walking through the woods and talking to his subscribers.
Friday night, but I'm going away Saturday, so I've got a bit of a drive as well, so I didn't want to be tired. And it's going to throw it down Friday night as well. And rain comes. Is that a budget? Hello?
Even though some pretty human-like footsteps could be heard right behind him, as soon as he turned around to scan his environment, there was nobody in sight. What's most disturbing is that as soon as he turned around and yelled hello, the footsteps immediately stopped. For the next few minutes, he sits down and tries to regain his composure as he sips his coffee and eats his noodles. But things only continue to get even more creepy as the sun begins to set.
There's that noise again now. Hello? Hello? You got me. There's nobody here.
About 40 minutes into the video, the footstep noises can be heard again, and this time it sounds like they're getting closer to Daniel. By this point, most people would have hightailed it out of there without any hesitation, but Daniel decides to sit back down to finish his dinner as he tries to calm his nerves for the second time. Amazingly, a few minutes later, it almost seems like he completely forgets about the footsteps and manages to think about less disturbing things, which is honestly pretty impressive. But as darkness sets in, the eerie footsteps start up again.
I'm gonna be honest. I can't stay here now. I'm gonna be a wimp. I don't care if people call me a wimp in the comments, but I can't stay here. I'm too unsettled. I'm nervous. I've been camping like this loads of times. I think I'm gonna go find somewhere else to get this business settled. But I'm leaving this spot.
Understandably, after this third incident, Daniel decided to head subconscious tonight to play it safe. It's hard to know what exactly was making those sounds, but because they sounded very similar to human footsteps, it's possible that Daniel was being stalked by someone in the woods. This is obviously incredibly dangerous, as you can never really trust someone's intentions when you're in such a vulnerable position, all by yourself in unknown territory. It was either that or an animal walking through the grass. But because Daniel mentioned the grass was a little wet and would have made that dry sound if an animal stepped on it, this is pretty unlikely. Also, many people in the comments mentioned that no animal walks that uniform and steady. They stop, go, and change pace constantly. Either way, it's a good thing he decided to leave, because who knows what would happen to Daniel then. One of the most annoying things to me is spam texts and phone calls. You would actually be surprised by the amount of times I get interrupted recording these videos by phone calls from random numbers. Well, I did some research and uncovered that a lot of times these spammers are able to get our personal info, email addresses, and phone numbers because big companies can't keep our data safe from data breaches and hacks. You may not have heard, but back in May, Ticketmaster was hacked and the data of over 500 million people were put up for sale on the dark web for anyone to buy. This stolen data included full names, addresses. I didn't think the hack would be the dark web. The Rampant Range is part of a front range of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, made up of almost in the description. The Rampant Range is part of a front range of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, made up of almost entirely public land within the Pike National Forest. In the summer, you'll find lots of bikers enjoying the Rampant Range's elaborate trail system and exploring the great outdoors. For the most part, this part of Colorado is a paradise for anyone who enjoys spending time in nature. But over the past few years, there's been a pretty alarming trend on the rise, with random people setting up wires on trees at just about head height in an effort to seriously injure bikers on the trail. In 2019, a post describing this terrifying trend was uploaded to Facebook. And disturbingly, the uploader mentioned that one of his high school friends had lost his life as a result of running into a similar wire on a trail. Immediately, people jumped into the comments to point out how incredibly messed up it would be to do something like this, and how this kind of evil needs to be categorized as attempted murder if the suspects are ever caught. A couple of years before that post was made, in 2017, two motorbike riders uploaded a video to YouTube of their encounter with a similar wire, and although nothing happened to them, it was a very close call. 2017, two motorbike riders uploaded a video to YouTube of their encounter with a similar wire, and although nothing happened to them, it was a very close call. When these wires are set up off trail, it can be hard to tell whether they were placed there out of malice or if a random camper or farmer placed the wires there to hang up clothes or something similar. But in cases like these where the wires are specifically placed on the trail, there's really only one reason people would do that, and that's to bring serious harm to bikers for some reason. Possibly they're annoyed with the constant loud sound of the bikes near their property or something else. But hopefully more measures can be taken in the future to prevent more people from getting hurt, especially because it's not uncommon to hear about motorbikers and snowmobilers losing their lives over this kind of stuff. This audio was uploaded to YouTube by a user named ForestFire number 21. He recorded it around 2 a.m. in December 2014. The uploader lives in a forest, and he mentioned that the noises in the audio were coming from deep in the woods behind his house.
481, 538, negative 538.
In the future to prevent more people from getting hurt, especially because it's not uncommon to hear about motorbikers and snowmobilers losing their lives over this kind of stuff. This audio was uploaded to YouTube by a user named ForestFire number 21. He recorded it around 2 a.m. in December 2014. The uploader lives in a forest, and he mentioned that the noises in the audio were coming from deep in the woods behind his house. It's hard to make out what the child is yelling, but after listening closely, several users jumped in the comments to point out that you can also hear an adult voice yelling, "Where are you?" In addition to the young female voice making most of the noise, this quieter, more subtle male voice that can also be heard in the audio only makes the whole incident that much more disturbing. Near the end of the video, the uploader mentions that after that night, he checked the news every day to see if he could find some explanation for the screams, but he never did. The fact that the screaming was captured at around 2 a.m. in the freezing cold weather and in the middle of the woods indicates that the uploader could have genuinely recorded something pretty sinister taking place that night. It's hard to tell why the uploader would record and upload the audio instead of immediately calling the police after hearing a female voice in such obvious distress, but at this point there's not much that can be done about it. And who knows, maybe the uploader did call the police. There wasn't much context given in the video's description. We can only hope that whatever problem happened that night was eventually solved, but based on the shrillness of the screams and the strangeness of the whole situation, we probably won't ever be able to know for sure. Lisa is a life coach and YouTuber who like living in her van and traveling the country on her own. One afternoon in 2022, Lisa had parked her van on the side of the road and left the side door of her van open while she cooked her dinner inside. When suddenly a sketchy-looking guy approached her, poked his head in her van without her permission, and started asking her some pretty bizarre questions in French, a language Lisa doesn't speak. When she mentioned she didn't understand what he was saying, he pulled out a translator app to try to communicate with her, which obviously made her pretty uncomfortable, especially since she wasn't interested in talking to him in the first place after he invaded her personal space. After watching the guy struggle to use Google Translate for a few minutes, Lisa decided she'd had enough and shut the side door in his face, also closing the curtain to make sure the guy got the hint. Strangely, for over half an hour, the guy then stood outside in the rain and tinkered with the translator app to try to communicate with Lisa, even after she made it more than obvious that she wanted nothing to do with him.
Okay, he just moved even closer. so that I can't move out, and so that I can't go forward, so that I can't move out. Hank, you just moved even closer. Hank, you just moved even closer, so that I can't move out, and so that I can't go forward. Please leave. Please leave. Please, Sketchy.
Always trying to make dudes look like they're such fucking predators. Fucking nigger cunts. Cut that bitch's throat. Shit. This is why people kill people. Fucking
With a
retarded.
very shady demeanor, the man snuck into the bushes and pretty much just stalked Lisa from a distance, as if he thought she couldn't see him. As the sun began to set, Lisa kept an eye on the guy outside to make sure he didn't try to get close to her again. But the man just kept on bringing his car closer to her van and blocking her exit in different ways for more than half an hour.
Really starting to freak me out. It's been like a half an hour and it just keeps on moving his vehicle so he can see in my van here. Anyways, it's 7 o'clock, 7 p.m.
Fortunately, just as darkness had begun to set in, a family in an RV pulled up right behind Lisa and spent the night in the same parking lot as her, which comforted her enough to stay there the entire evening. Disturbingly, the guy left soon after the other family arrived, but came back about 3 hours later in the dead of night to check if Lisa was still there. When he saw the other family in the RV was also still in the parking lot, he left and didn't come back. The next morning, Lisa left early and never saw the guy again. It's hard to tell what the guy's exact intentions were, but based on his overall sketchy demeanor and questionable behavior, they couldn't have been anything good. The one thing we can be sure about is that it's a good thing the other family in the RV arrived at the parking lot when they did. Otherwise, who knows what the man would have done to Lisa. In May 2014, Imagery uploaded a blog post where he talked about the timing of development found in northern Germany. According to the uploader, his friend told him about these pipes that he had found in the woods near his house that stuck up under the woods. Apparently, his friend and his siblings told him about these kids, the bunkers hidden below, but the parents never allowed them to get near them because of their safety. During the visit narrated in the blog post, the uploader and his friend decided to check out the pipes and finally go down into the bunkers that they never had permission to explore when they were younger, and they found some pretty disturbing stuff. A few hundred feet away from the tree, they found the entrance to the bunker covered with a loosely placed piece of wood that they easily removed with a crowbar. Once inside, all they could see were these long, seemingly endless, hospital-like hallways that extended for thousands of feet under the woods. As they ventured further and further into the maze of tunnels, they found graffiti on some of the walls, indicating they weren't the first people to get the idea to explore the underground bunkers. To the explorers' horror, one of the walls deep inside the tunnels had the word "help" in German graffitied all over it. It's possible that it was just sprayed on there by another group of teens trying to be funny, but the eerie nature of the bunker, coupled with the general state of disarray, really makes you wonder if something more sinister took place down there at some point, possibly even written by German soldiers in the later parts of World War II. As they traveled deeper into the bunker, they found some more disturbing graffiti, with one of the eeriest messages reading, "Hello Satan, I love you." Obviously, that's not the kind of message you want to see in a tunnel system like this, but the two friends decided to keep on exploring anyway. After several hours down in the bunker, they ended up finding tons of more twisting, winding hallways, flooded rooms with old machines, and dark, narrow corridors that reached dead ends, but nothing more disturbing than the graffiti they had found a few years earlier. The explorers managed to make it out of there safely and didn't go back there again. In the summer of 2016, reports started surfacing that people were finding dangerous booby traps along a very well-known hiking trail in the High Mountain Park Preserve in Wayne, New Jersey. As per the police reports, the traps mostly consisted of boards with nails sticking under them, barbed wire, broken bottles placed along the trails behind or near rocks or logs, and other treacherous materials. As more and more complaints started coming in, police warned people to keep an eye out for the traps, and even organized cleanup efforts to keep hikers safe during their treks. What's most disturbing is that these traps were clearly placed there to hurt people, as there's really no other reason to put nails and barbed wire on the ground in the middle of such a popular hiking trail. The fact that someone would take the time to get out on the trail, build a booby trap in such detail, and place it there with the intention to do harm to other people and their pets is honestly pretty messed up. But it didn't take the cops too long to make an educated guess as to who was behind the whole thing. Although they never found the individual suspect responsible for placing the traps on the trail, the sheriff's department determined that the traps had probably something to do with the feud between hikers and bikers who have been fighting over the use of the trail for decades. According to many nearby residents, it's common for bikers on the trail to speed past the hikers without ringing their bells or announcing their presence, which has led to several injuries and rising tensions between the two groups over the years. Still, it's hard to imagine that someone would take the issue to the point of trying to harm them so maliciously with such brutal methods. Fortunately, no one was hurt as a result of the traps, but the suspects responsible were caught.
Fucking nigger.
Ears perked up, and was looking off into the darkness right ahead. And so Ada instinctively took her flashlight and raised it up and aimed it in the direction her dog was looking. And right away, that cone of light illuminated these two eyes looking right back at Ada. And immediately Ada knew what she was staring at. It was a mountain lion. And so doing her best to stay calm, Ada slowly reached into her pocket to pull out her gun.
I've already heard this one.
Daniel O'Neill is a YouTuber from the UK with a channel called English Woods, where he's been uploading videos of his wild camping, stealth camping, and woodland camping trips in the UK for almost 10 years. Most of the channel's videos feature Daniel reviewing camping gear for his viewers and showing footage of his adventures in the great outdoors. For the most part, they're pretty tame, but in August 2023, he uploaded a video of his camping trip in the woodlands close to his home, and the footage is pretty disturbing. The first part of the video pretty much just shows Daniel walking through the woods and talking to his subscribers, eating berries, and pointing out the sights on the way to the campsite. At several points along the way, he pauses to mention the footprints and garbage he sees lying on the trail, indicating other people had been there in the last few days.
Someone's been here. There's a lot of rubbish around here. Yeah, I could stay to this. Does get used, doesn't it?
After about a 20-minute walk, he sits down in a clearing where he plans to set up camp for the night and leans back on a tree to eat his noodles as he talks to the camera. It's not until around 25 minutes into the video that things start to get seriously disturbing for Daniel.
I'll be out Friday night, but I'm going away Saturday, so I've got a bit of a drive as well, so I don't want to be tired. And it's going to throw it down Friday night as well. And rain camping is really good.
Since 2017, a YouTuber named Phil has been uploading videos of his hiking trips to his channel Hike Slam, where he gives his viewers a glimpse into everything he does to prepare for a long hike, camp alone in the middle of the woods, choose the right hiking gear, and pretty much everything related to the outdoors. On the night before Thanksgiving 2021, Phil went on an overnight hike to camp on the Appalachian Trail near his house in Virginia. For the first half hour of his trip, but after a while, he finds some odd-looking trash lying on the side of the trail. Strangely, there appears to be some writing on some of the containers he finds, which appear to be song lyrics, though it's hard to imagine why anyone would go through the trouble of writing out entire songs or poems on a plastic container, only to later throw it on the side of the trail. As he crosses the boundary into the wilderness, things continue to get stranger and stranger, and as he nears the campsite, Phil finds another series of disturbing notes.
Weirdness continues.
Fucking thing.
There's a dead duck here.
Some of the notes appear to contain cryptic poems, others seem to talk about pretty in-depth conspiracy theories and undercover federal agents or something, and the rest appear to be biographical, with whoever wrote them telling parts of their story. It's tough to confirm if the person who wrote the notes was the same person who killed the duck, but honestly, it would be too much of a coincidence for the dead duck to be lying right there next to the series of creepy notes, which were obviously placed there recently considering they're in good condition and not wet. An eerie scene, Phil notices a tarp and a fire next to a campsite about 20 yards away from the notes and the dead duck. Staying as far away as possible from the campsite, he continues making his way out to a shelter. Although this next part wasn't caught on camera, Phil then reported that he saw two women coming down the trail with their dog, asking if he had seen the guy who was leaving the creepy notes and dead animals on the side of the trail. When Phil mentioned he saw a campsite and a fire a few yards away from the notes, the woman got scared and asked him to walk back to their car with them. Thinking it was probably a good idea to move as far away as possible from the campsite anyway, Phil went back with them and then started hiking in the other direction to find a safer place to spend the night. Fortunately, the rest of his hike to the new shelter was a lot more uneventful for Phil, and once he got there, he was able to set up a camp for the night, light a fire, and enjoy his dinner miles away from the disturbing notes he found. A few minutes later, once it got dark, Phil decided to go into the shelter and check out to see some of the notes and stories other hikers had left behind. And that's when things get extremely creepy again.
They work playing every day.
You fucking niggers. I'm gonna kill you fucking cunts. I'm gonna fucking skin your family, nigger. Fucking faggot. I cannot wait to kill these cunts. Goddamn them. I'm gonna have a hard on. Goddamn niggers.
Was a lot more uneventful for Phil. And once he got there, he was able to set up a camp for the night, light a fire, and enjoy his dinner miles away from the disturbing notes he found. A few minutes later, once it got dark, Phil decided to go into the shelter and check out the camp log and see something in the other direction to find a safer place to spend the night. Fortunately, the rest of his hike to the new shelter was a lot more uneventful for Phil, and once he got there, he was able to set up a camp for the night, light a fire, and enjoy his dinner miles away from the disturbing notes he found. A few minutes later, once it got dark, Phil decided to go into the shelter and check out the camp log and see the notes and stories other hikers had left behind. That's when things get extremely creepy again.
Fucking kill you, Mojang. Gonna kill you. Gonna kill you, Mojang nigger. Niggers. Who the fuck is See, these guys are such fucking niggers. I'm gonna slit their goddamn throats. In their goddamn sleep. Fucking faggots. 257. Kill these motherfucking niggers in their goddamn offices, faggots. Gonna kill you if you don't shut the fuck up, cunts. Negative 633.
Every shelter on the Appalachian Trail has a shelter log where people write in their trail names and what's going on. They can write whatever they want in there. So it's kind of cool tradition here. Let's see what this one says. Little engine. Next section. Hiking again finally. Nice little trail magic. Writing and stuff. Alright, let's see what's happened recently. Holy crap. This writing looks almost exactly like the writing that was on that garbage a couple of miles from here.
Even though the shelter where Phil's currently staying at is more than 2 miles away and on the other side of the road from the previous one, the handwriting in the camp log is exactly the same as the handwriting that was on the notes and garbage on the other side of the road. This is pretty disturbing in itself, but it gets even more so when Phil starts to actually read some of the content in the logbook.
2018, while I was incarcerated at the Okaloosa County Jail. What the heck? Solitary confinement. I figured the following out. Refer to Isaiah 28:15 through 9. This is the same ramblings from the guy that was on the other side of the river. That's kind of scary. Kind of weird. Those women down there said they were going to call the police on the guy. Wow, this is weird. It's just like it goes in one direction, then immediately goes in a completely different direction. And it's just so much of it. Like this line up here. Think grave robbery in an attempt to obscure the reality of Little Mrs. Wolf. Content. Come up with some more of those wicked schemes, JB and company, so I can show some more of your true character.
The fact that there's a convicted felon walking around the woods leaving dark and weird notes all over the place is extremely concerning, and based on the kinds of stuff the guy is writing, he's probably not in his right mind. This could obviously be dangerous for Phil, especially since it's already pretty dark and he doesn't appear to have anything to defend himself with. As he gets ready to go to sleep in his tent, Phil walks back to the shelter once more, where he finds half a Gatorade bottle hanging from a string on the ceiling with a note in the same guy's handwriting that reads, "Watch out for Yeet Mouse. The dead do walk and talk." Understandably creeped out by yet another disturbing note, Phil tries to fall asleep in his tent, obviously a little on edge from everything that happened that day. The last thing you'd want to happen if you were in Phil's position would probably be to start hearing strange noises near the shelter in the middle of the night. And that's exactly what happened. While he was falling asleep, he heard something moving near the shelter, and as he poked his head out of the tent, he saw a single guy with a headlamp walking around the shelter. Not wanting to find out if it was the same guy who had been leaving notes, he quietly made his way back to the truck in the middle of the night, checking over his shoulder the entire way to make sure he wasn't being followed. Luckily, he made it back home safely, and as of 2024, he hasn't uploaded another video about the strange notes he found on the Appalachian Trail. It's pretty likely that dozens of other hikers after him came across the disturbing notes and the dead duck, but we'll probably never know who exactly the guy who wrote them was, or what he would have done if he ran into any unsuspecting campers. Grizzly Gaz is a camping channel on YouTube consisting of dozens of videos featuring Gaz, the uploader, going on hiking and camping trips in the UK with his French bulldog named Fendi. In a lot of his videos, he goes camping in some pretty extreme conditions, and he often shows footage of his unexpected encounters with big animals in the middle of the woods. In April 2023, Gaz uploaded a video of a camping trip he made somewhere in the woods in the UK. The first part of the camping trip goes pretty much according to plan, with the footage showing Gaz setting up his tent and chopping wood to make a fire while his dog Fendi keeps him company as the sun begins to set. This next part wasn't shown in the footage, but as Gaz started to prepare his steak dinner over the fire, a random man in jeans and a coat approached his campsite and asked him for a beer and some food.
I've got steaks on go now. Bit of ribeye. Pot boiling for some mash. And I've got a visitor. Creeped up behind me asking me if I had a light. Me pants. Creeped up behind me asking me if I had a light. Me pants. This is Martin anyway. I don't know him, but he's stopping for a steak, so. You went round here in a poncho a couple of months ago, were you?
Although the encounter with the man itself was pretty tame, it's still pretty creepy to be camping in the woods in the middle of nowhere and suddenly be approached by a random guy asking for things. If you listen closely to what he's saying, some of the guy's sentences are a little incoherent, and he appears to ramble a bit when he talks. It's like he's kind of out of it. Later in the footage, Gaz reveals that Martin was homeless, and that as they shared their dinner, he told Gaz his story about how he had ruined his life with the drugs, and how he had ended up walking alone in the woods that day. Disturbingly, Gaz also mentioned that while they were having dinner, he turned around for a few seconds to chop some more wood to keep the fire going, and when he turned back around, Martin had left the campsite unannounced without even thanking Gaz for food. After this strange encounter, the uploader decided to leave the campsite and head home out of fear that the man would possibly tell his friends about meeting some guy camping out in the middle of the woods with expensive filming equipment lying around and suggest robbing him or possibly worse. To see if Martin would come back in the middle of the night with possibly ill intentions, Gaz actually left a trail camera on the tree at the campsite to capture everything that happened that night. Based on his behavior, it's pretty hard to gauge Martin's intentions and know whether he was just confused and possibly under the influence, or if he had something more sinister planned that evening. Either way, it's probably a good thing that Gaz left the campsite and didn't go back until the next morning, especially since, when he did go back, his trail camera that he had left was completely gone. Creepy Outdoors is a channel where the uploader frequently shows footage of nighttime visits to sketchy outdoor locations during all 4 seasons. In October 2022, Creepy Outdoors uploaded a video of a camping trip he took to an unnamed forest in the middle of nowhere, recording everything he saw as he explored some of the surrounding woods in the darkness. For the first few minutes, all you can hear is the guy's breathing. You can't help but be kind of amazed at how brave it is to visit a dark forest in the middle of nowhere all alone, not knowing if you're going to run into potentially hostile animals or something else. As the video progresses, the uploader makes a few comments and observations on his surroundings. Throughout the footage, there doesn't appear to be anyone else in the forest with him. Around 13 minutes in, though, an extremely disturbing sound takes the footage in a pretty dark direction.
Hold on, y'all.
In the distance, probably a couple of 100 feet away from the uploader, a voice yells, "I see you." It's possible that the disturbing sound was made by a coyote or a fox, but because it sounded so much like I See You, it could have been another camper trying to mess with the uploader and scare him. Because the YouTuber had been talking and making noise almost the whole time, he might have inadvertently alerted someone else who may have wanted to play a prank on him just for the fun of it. Still, it's hard to imagine why anyone else would be wandering in the same secluded part of the woods as the uploader. What's most disturbing is that the person or animal or whatever it was that made the noise appeared to yell out right after the guy turned off his lamp, almost as if they were waiting for that to happen to yell out something disturbing. Luckily, the uploader was able to make it back to his campsite safely, and has continued uploading outdoor footage to this day. Sam is a YouTuber from Cleveland, Ohio, who's been uploading videos of his stealth camping trips to his channel, The Northwest Wind, since 2016. For those of you who don't know, stealth camping just means parking your camper van pretty much anywhere without paying for parking, and people do it anywhere from residential neighborhoods to the middle of nowhere. In January 2024, Sam uploaded footage of his stealth camping trip to the woods in Cleveland, leaving his camper van at a local dog park a few hundred yards away. On his way into the woods, he finds a camping tent that's been shredded to pieces, which is honestly a little creepy, but he keeps going anyway. After setting up his tent in the woods, he starts cooking dinner on a camping stove. As the sun starts to set, he sees a couple of people walking by the campsite, and this is when he mentions that he's getting a bad vibe and feels like he's possibly in danger from them. Most experienced campers would probably tell you that if your gut is telling you something's wrong, you should probably call it a day and leave, but Sam decided to stick it out for the night and kept on recording. As soon as he settles down in his tent to get some sleep, things start to get very creepy.
See it or not through the tent. I'm leaning right up against the light, but somebody's walking around out there very close to the tent.
As the seconds pass by, the footsteps outside seem to get louder and louder. At one point, Sam calls out to whoever's out there, but at first he doesn't get a response. It's only after he calls out for about the 5th time that every camper's worst nightmare starts to become a reality for Sam.
They're walking around outside in circles.
Hello? Hello? Alright, don't want this. Hello? Hello?
They're touching my tent.
Hello? Hello? I'm getting out of here. Hello? Hello?
You're an
I
idiot.
don't know what this is, but we're getting out of here. Hang on. Hello? Okay, they're walking away now. What do you want? What do you want?
You're a fucking idiot.
I have a knife. Where's my knife?
You would have pulled the camera out with the light and shown us.
Over here. Holy
Fucking
crap, get
idiot.
away. What do you want? Hello, I can't see you. Hello? Alright, I'm getting out of here. We're getting out of here.
I didn't like that idiot.
One thing that a lot of people in the comments of Sam's video have pointed out is that if you're being stalked or attacked by a stranger in the middle of the woods, it's probably not a good idea to show weakness by saying things like, I can't see you, I'm spooked, and I don't like this. After this, the attackers apparently leave the campsite, but as soon as he steps out of the tent, Sam sees them standing literally in the woods just a few feet away from him.
Collapsed my tent on me. I don't know which way they went. I think they went this way. I see you. Get away!
You would have been pulled the fucking thing out, you lying cunt nigger. Someone needs to slit your throat.
Like this. Getting out of here right now. We're just standing there. We're just standing there. What do you want? Leave me alone!
Completely freaking out after the disturbing encounter, he obviously decides to call it a night and head back to his van in the park. But things only continue to get worse for Sam.
Alright, they're moving again. I don't know, I'm getting out of here. We're going. I'll come back for this some other time. Alright, out of here. I'm leaving, don't follow me! I don't know where to go. I don't know which way to get out of here. I smell your cigarette, I can hear you! I hear you.
As he's making his way back to the park, he looks back at the campsite and sees the attackers stealing his things, but he decides to leave his stuff behind, terrified for his life.
No, he didn't. He's a lying fucking nigger.
I smell your cigarette. I can hear you.
That guy's such a fucking.
I hear you.
As he's making his way back to the park, he looks back at the campsite and sees the attackers stealing his things, but he decides to leave his stuff behind, terrified for his life. As he's running through the woods now, he turns back and sees his attackers chasing him.
Gotta lead back to the main trail. I don't know where they are. I think it's all foggy up here. I got water in my headlamp. I don't know where to go. I don't see or hear anybody anymore.
I hate these motherfuckers.
I hear them coming. I can't see the shadow. Here's a path. Okay, get me there. I'm recording all of this. I'm calling the police. Running back on the path. Back on the path. Okay. Get away from me!
After making it back to his van
that shit
safely,
up.
he drove home and gave his viewers a recap of everything that happened. As you can imagine, a lot of people in the comments accused the uploader of staging the video, mentioning that nobody in their right mind would continue to record as they sprint through the woods in the dark. But his reaction seems pretty genuine to me.
No, but
Different people act different ways in situations of stress. As for who the two guys who stalked and attacked him were and what they wanted, that's really anyone's guess. If what they did to Sam was some kind of joke, that's a pretty messed up joke to play on someone. But because the uploader confirmed that they didn't end up stealing his stuff when he went back the following morning, it's also clear that looting the campsite wasn't really their main focus. We can't really know what they would have done to him if he hadn't run from the campsite, but at any rate, it's probably a good thing he did. Love Sundays is a camping channel on YouTube run by a guy named Sean, who uploads some pretty cool footage of his solo camping trips everywhere in the UK. In February 2024, he uploaded a video where he left his van on the side of the road next to the woods, and then went to do some exploring, jumping over a fence to walk through the woods. After that, Sean makes his way back to his van to make dinner, where he then heads out once again for an evening stroll through the woods. Upon his return to the van, he goes to bed at about 9 p.m., but at 3 in the morning, things start to get a little disturbing.
Well, I'll see you in the morning. Good. Well, I'll see you in the morning. Good night. Good night.
As soon as Sean pulls back the curtains, the people who were walking around the van get back in their car. When he put his head out the window to see what was going on, the car drove away, leaving him alone for the rest of the night. It wasn't until the next morning that Sean realized what the visitors had done to his van.
Right, well, I think we should at least go outside and see how miserable the weather is. The door's stuck. So here's there's obviously just people want to about and just be funny, I guess, but how dangerous is that? Locking someone in their van? Let me check the back door. Well, there's nothing on this one because they're going to be able to tie it to 22, would they? There's nowhere they could have done that door anyway.
Why someone would want to lock a stranger in their van is anyone's guess, and the only reasonable explanation I can think of is that maybe they were trying to steal the diesel from the van and put the zip ties on the door in case Sean realized what was happening and attempted to get him to stop them. It could have also been a local who didn't want anyone parking their camping van in that area, but will likely never know. Luckily, after he cut the zip ties off, he made it back home unharmed and has continued uploading videos of his camping adventures in the UK. TheFactsByHowToHunt.com is a channel dedicated to sharing knowledge about the outdoors and encouraging people to explore the wilderness. In January 2022, a pretty terrifying video was uploaded to the channel in which a group of teenagers can be seen reacting to some strange sounds coming from somewhere in the woods.
Get your Austin, come on.
Oh, the wolves out.
Hey!
Fucking idiot.
That was not
Everybody, get in my truck.
When you're out in the woods in the middle of the night, it can be easy to mistake certain animal noises with human screams. Foxes, coyotes, and bobcats are all known to make sounds that can sometimes be hard to tell apart from human yelling. In this case, I don't know of any animal that can make that kind of noise, especially when you consider how loud the banging on the trees was. Elk are known to rub their antlers against trees, but it obviously doesn't sound that loud or menacing. A lot of people in the comments of the video have mentioned that the sounds aren't too different from human screams, and it could have just been a man screaming in the woods. In the middle of the night, although that's also pretty messed up in itself. Even though some viewers have claimed the video is staged, the uploader's reactions seem pretty genuine in this case. And the only thing we can say for sure is that it's probably a good thing that the guys didn't run into whoever or whatever was making those noises.
Oh, no, give me a second. Arg. You piece of shit.
One. By week 146, one of the scientists failed to meet their quota due to a lack of access to specimen X001, leading to her demise at the hands of the mainframe. Blaming the overseer, a man named Eric, the team confronted him, only to discover that he was orchestrating an escape plan which involved infecting the mainframe with a virus in order for them to flee. Although the plan initially succeeded, the mainframe activated superseding Protocol Omega, causing the residents' deaths. Despite this, the virus
I'll be exercise for a little bit.
successfully shut down the mainframe, leaving the vault open, prompting animals to escape and triggering the emergency management system to call for assistance. In the year 2104, the vault was taken over by a scientist named Edgar Blackburn, who used its research equipment to attempt to create an improved strand of FEV in order to help humanity adapt to the wasteland. He would do this by hiring a group of mercenaries known as the Hellcat Company in order to guard Vault 96 and abduct unsuspecting dwellers for him to experiment on. Vault 101, located west of Springvale, Virginia, held a social experiment which studied the role of the Overseer in a vault that was never intended to open. After the Great War, the residents remained isolated, as the Overseer fabricated an illusion of the outside world being uninhabitable, fostering the belief that survival solely existed within the vault. This continued for years until one Overseer elected to break the cycle of isolationism and sent an expedition team out into the wasteland. When they returned, they would analyze samples taken from the wasteland that the team collected. This would lead to two team members, Lewis and Agnes Taylor, to be sent to Megaton for further exploration and contact between the two settlements. Eventually, Agnes would return to Vault 101 around 2258, and the Overseer would vanish after a failed expedition into the capital wasteland. Eventually, a new Overseer named Alphonse Almodovar would seek to return to the ways of isolationism and seal the vault once more. Until one day, a man named James came to the vault seeking shelter, offering his services as a doctor in exchange for the safety of him and his infant child. The Overseer would let them in, and James would keep his child in the dark about their origins in the wasteland because of his agreement with Alphonse, convincing your player character that they were born in the vault. The Overseer would continue his regime of isolationism with only one woman managing to escape the vault. Eventually, in 2277, a rat roach infestation sparked chaos in Vault 101, enabling James to escape. This caused even further turmoil, leading to several deaths. After the Overseer orders the killing of multiple people, including the Lone Wanderer, you escape into the wasteland, fleeing from the Overseer's wrath. While your player character leaves to find your father, the Vault 101 Overseer increases security measures, causing division among the dwellers who realize the possibility of a life on the outside. As tensions rose, Amada, the Overseer's daughter, would send out a broadcast frequency seeking the return of the player to help resolve the situation, leaving the fate of Vault 101 in the hands of the Lone Wanderer. Vault 106, located southeast of Arefu, conducted an experiment in which the air filtration system was contaminated with psychoactive drugs 10 days after the vault door closed. This experiment was known by the Overseer and the vault staff, and they were each instructed to keep this a secret from the dwellers. As time went on, the effects of the drugs began to take their toll on the dwellers, as they began to show more and more signs of aggressive behavior, prompting the Overseer to order a lockdown. However, the deranged residents eventually overwhelmed vault security and brutally murdered them as well as the Overseer. Years later in Fallout 3, you can find the vault inhabited by insane survivors who have all descended into madness due to years of breathing in psychoactive drugs. As you explore the vault, your character actually begins to see hallucinations of characters from their past, such as Amada, the Tunnel Snakes, and your father. Vault 108, located north of Washington, D.C., had an abundance of problems. The vault was designed to house 475 people for only 38 years, the power supply was set to fail after 20 years, and the Overseer was set to die after only 3 years due to a rare type of cancer. The experiment also deliberately left standard positions vacant, as well as providing the residents with no entertainment tapes. Basically, this vault sucked ass. However, in addition to these failures, the vault came equipped with a cloning lab. After the vault sealed, cloning experiments would be conducted which produced 53 clones of a man named Gary. Each cloned iteration of Gary exhibited hostility towards non-clones, escalating with each replication. Subsequent clones became increasingly violent, leading to them eventually purging the vault of its residents. By 2277, the vault is solely inhabited by clones who are only capable of saying one word. Gary, 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 Gary. Vault 111, located in Sanctuary Hills, Massachusetts, was designed as a medical experiment studying the long-term effects of cryogenic stasis on its unsuspecting residents. Once the vault was sealed, its residents would be told to enter cryostasis pods that were masqueraded as decontamination chambers. Once the residents were frozen, the vault was said to remain sealed for at least 180 days. After 180 days passed, there was no all-clear signal, resulting in the Overseer's decision to maintain the vault's sealed status despite dwindling supplies. Following this, a group led by security and support staff rebelled against the Overseer, and in response, the Overseer initiated a lockdown. Unfortunately, the logs abruptly ended, and you can presume based on the skeletons scattered throughout the vault that the staff would soon perish after these events. In 2227, the mysterious organization known as the Institute discovered the vault and found that one of survivors of Vault 111. Vault 112, located southwest of Washington, D.C., was designed to house 85 people. The Vault's unique experiment involved immersing occupants of perpetual virtual realities overseen by Dr. Stanislav Braun, creator of the Garden of Eden creation kit. The Vault housed a set of virtual reality pods which simulated a utopic suburb known as Tranquility Lane. Unbeknownst to its occupants, once they entered the virtual reality pods, Braun held absolute control over the simulation. Inside the simulation, Braun would take on the form of a little girl named Betty, and he would use his power to turn the Vault's residents into his personal playthings, repeatedly murdering them inside the simulation. Each time Braun murdered them, he would wipe their memory and resurrect them within the program, creating a cycle of torture that would go on for centuries. Vault 114, located inside Park Street Station in Boston, Massachusetts, was a social experiment that was advertised as a luxury vault for wealthy members of society. However, in reality, the vault was designed to be cramped and overpopulated in addition to being under the leadership of an overseer with an abundance of ventilators. The vault was nearing completion with construction Ken Harry being selected as overseer. However, the vault was never finished, potentially due to contract fraud and embezzlement. Eventually, after the bombs fell, its construction site was repurposed as a base of operations for Skinny Malone's gang of Triggermen. Vault 118, hidden beneath the Cliffs Edge Hotel in Mount Desert Island, Maine, was designed as an exclusive establishment aiming to attract wealthy and influential individuals seeking privilege and luxury. The Vault's original experiment would involve segregating residents into two groups, an elite class of 10 ultra-rich individuals pampered by robotic staff, and a larger working class populace of 300 confined to cramped conditions. The rich would hold authority over the others, with robotic staff executing their judgments. However, construction on the second wing intended for the working class group ceased due to financial issues. The primary financier, Ezra Parker, stopped funding, citing payment difficulties from the guests. In addition to him, executing their judgments. However, construction on the second wing intended for the working class group ceased due to financial issues. The primary financier, Ezra Parker, stopped funding, citing payment difficulties from the guests. In addition to him, the vault was set to host influential figures such as former Hollywood actors Keith McKinley and Gilda Brasco, a famous painter named Santiago Avida, as well as Dr. Riggs and his wife Juliana. Dr. Riggs in particular was involved in robotics research, and he was able to convince his fellow residents to consider having their brains inserted into robo-brains so that they could become immortal. They all agreed and went through with the procedure, and when the Great War came and the vault was sealed, the overseer became the only remaining human amidst the robo-brain residents. Centuries passed, and one day, Ezra Parker, the primary financier of Vault 118, was murdered, leading the residents to seek help from the player characters in investigating who did it. In Fallout 76, a raider named Bruiser claims that he grew up in a vault somewhere on the East Coast. He claims that he participated in a warlike gladiator sport inside the vault, which based on his description, sounds strikingly similar to American football. At some point during the vault, he left, and eventually ended up in Appalachia, West Virginia. Nothing else is known about this vault, as Bruiser doesn't give us a number that we can assign to it, but hopefully it will be explored by the Fallout franchise in an expansion or in a future Fallout title. Alright guys, that was every vault in the
Oh, you fucking idiots. You guys are stupid. Okay.
In the past 4 years, more than 180 people have come forward claiming they were sexually abused by priests in this area over the past 60 years. 66, more than one-third, reported they were molested by former priest Patrick O'Donnell.
Did you molest the two brothers at the same time? Yes. When did you molest the other boy? I believe it was in the summer of 1972.
During the period 1972 until you left in 1976, approximately how many teenage boys did you have sexual contact with? More than 10?
Yes.
More than 20?
I remember ever doing a count, but I'm sure it was more than 20. Well, I know I took a lot of boys up to Mount St. Michael's where there was skinny dipping.
When there were complaints, the diocese moved O'Donnell to a new parish. No one ever called police, and O'Donnell was free to molest again. In 1986, the diocese sent O'Donnell over to Seattle for treatment, but he admits he never stopped preying on teenage boys and even continued when he returned to Spokane.
You told Bishop Welch about your history of sexual contact with after you told him that, did he tell you that associated teenage boys? Did he put any restrictions on you associated with teenage boys?
No, but in the fall of 1980, I don't think it was a restriction, but he had me go back into counseling.
So five problems, major problems. Priests who become alcoholics, fill their life with pornography, priests who break celibacy by committing fornication with married and or unmarried women, priests who have fathered children with nuns or lay women, priests who are led into sodomy by the seminarians, priests and nuns who have become predators of children. That just scratches the surface of the problem that exists in the priesthood, where the priesthood can never be, almost never be done away with. And number two, where they impose a commandment on them that they can never, ever act upon sexual urges that God put in every human. And I've listened to several documentaries where they actually go and they interview somebody at the Vatican, and in two of them it's been the same guy. And the reporter will say, well, isn't there any talk in the Vatican from the Pope and from the cardinals about doing away with the command of celibacy? And he says repeatedly, no. You need to understand that celibacy is a gift given to them by God. If it is such a gift given to them by God, then why is it that these priests are constantly denying that gift that's in them? Trading it in for the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes. Now, let's get into the confessional part. What really led me in this direction from the very beginning was a book I had read several years ago called The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional. It was actually written by a Catholic priest from Quebec, Canada, who knew what was going on in the Catholic Church. He had spent his entire life as a boy. He was a good Roman Catholic boy. Went into the seminary. He later wrote a book called 50 Years in the Church of Rome. He finally left the church and converted over to Protestant Christianity because he realized just how corrupt that was. One of the stories I remember, the author, this man, Charles Chiniquy, wrote of a time when he was a boy. And the priest in his town, they found him out in the street crying for help, and he was bleeding horribly. And they went to get the doctor. The doctor came and took him up to his place where he works on people. What he discovered was that the priest tonight.
Yes, I'll be right back.